Episode 15, Drafted. Cobal sat on a bench in a dimly lit room packed with toads. His knuckles were in pain from his failed attempts to punch his way out of the heavy steel door. He could hear the hum of engines underneath him as the Koopa cruiser rocked from side to side on its path through the air. Cobal was infuriated. He looked at his bruised and bloody fist and grimaced. How had he been so weak and useless? After retaking Toad Town, he had begun to think he was a cut above the Koopa Empire's soldiers. Why had that made him think he could take the whole army on? He had just wanted to save a few toads. Save them from the horror of being made to fight for the nation that enslaved them. But he had wound up captured himself. And thanks to his desperate attempts to fight his way out, he didn't have near enough strength left in him to resist the Koopas. The feeling in the dimly lit cabin packed with over 20 toads was one of despair. Several toads were sobbing while others stared at the ceiling with blank, hopeless looks. Cobal glanced at the red-capped toad sitting next to him, who seemed especially distraught.
"I'm going to die,"
the toad gasped, more to himself than any of the prisoners in the room.
"I can't fight. I'm going to get blown up, I'm going to get even, I'm going to—" "Be quiet!"
Cobal glared at him. The toad looked at him, his face paling. Cobal instantly felt sorry. He was a naturally gruff person and had difficulty controlling his temper. If he was going to follow in the path of the Mario brothers, that was a thing he'd have to fix.
"Don't worry about it,"
he said in less of a harsh voice.
Why?"
the toad asked, his voice choking.
"We're going to fight for the Koopas. We—" "Don't worry about it,"
he said, trying to recollect his confidence. It was difficult when you were trapped in a Koopa Empire aircraft headed towards an unknown destination.
"I'm aiming to make things better. Do you think I'd let a fellow Mushroom Kingdom guy die on my watch?"
The toad looked a little less frightened when he said that, although he was still sniffling.
Thanks,"
he said, wiping a tear from his eye.
"I'm S. Shroomer. Who are you? Are you with F. Fireflower?" "Nah, I'm not with them,"
Cobal replied.
"The name's Cobal. I'm not some famous Koopa fighter or anything."
Shroomer nodded, although thankfully he still appeared to be calmer than he was before. This was a good feeling, knowing that somebody trusted you and felt safer because of you. Was this how the Mario Bros felt? While Cobal had expected they'd be in air for over an hour, to his surprise he felt the Koopa cruiser land 10 minutes after his conversation with Shroomer. Almost immediately, the door was flung open and light poured into the cell from the better lit sections of the Koopa cruiser. There was a Hammer Bro standing in the doorway, looking at the prisoners with a gruff expression.
"Get up,"
he said crisply.
"Follow me and don't make trouble."
Cobal wanted to do nothing more than punch the lights out of the hammer-wielding Koopa. He forced himself to remain calm. Every bit of him was bruised and worn out. Most likely the Koopas had already marked him as a troublemaker. To make a fuss now would mean skipping the enlistment and heading right to the prisoners. It was better to take advantage of a bad situation rather than leap headlong into an even worse one. The Hammer Bro lead Cobal and the toads through the passages of the Koopa cruiser, over the wood-paneled floors and past the various barrels and crates they kept lying around for who knew why. There were Koopa troop members at every corner, making sure nobody would try anything funny. The Hammer Bro led them to an exit hatch, and Cobal finally stepped out into the light. Cobal's first impression of the place the Koopa cruiser had landed in was that in the pre-Empire days, it had likely been some kind of sports arena. The curving roads suggested it housed some sort of motorsports. That was certainly not going on now, however. The old arena had obviously been picked by the Empire for one reason: its size. There were thousands of people packed inside, assembled on and off the racetrack. It was about as diverse a crowd as Cobal had ever seen. Mostly species that traditionally sided with the Koopa Troop, yes, but a shocking amount of Toads and fellow Yoshis. There were 5 battleships hovering above the stadium, 2 of them with the same design as the others Cobal had seen, bearing the face of Prince Bowser Jr., with the 3 having figureheads modeled after a brown-scaled Koopa with similar, although rougher features. Cobal did not know the names of all of the Emperor's children, but it didn't take a genius to figure out that these airships were from a sector controlled by somebody other than Bowser Jr. It was also clear to Cobal that escape was impossible. They were surrounded on all sides by the rows and rows of seats. Thousands of people must be used to watch the games. Squinting, he could see Koopa Troop members on patrol there. The entire stadium was more or less a makeshift fortress at this point. A Lakitu flew up towards them, holding a clipboard.
All passengers of Cruiser 5363, please make your way to Group 69 for sorting,
he announced.
Repeat, making your way to Group 69 for sorting.
At an angry grunt from the Hammer Bro, the sullen group of conscripts began to make their way towards Group 69, clearly distinct from the other groups by a large sign next to it. These groups were what the conscripts were being divided into in the stadium, and there were dozens of Lakitus hovering around them, making notes. Their shrill voices rang through the air, intermixing with each other so that Cobal could scarcely tell what they were saying. It seemed as if they assigning certain people into groups. Cobal, his bruised legs aching by this point, lined up with the others in Group 69, in the middle of the packed-together crowd of people. He felt absolutely terrible going along with their demands like this, almost as if he was betraying Luigi.
Keep calm, Cobal,
he kept telling himself.
You'll get your chance, man. Just wait it out.
Another Lakitu hovered over them on his oddly cheerful cloud. He was carrying a long pointer stick and periodically he would tap somebody on the head with it. One of these people was Cobal.
You're on Strike's squad,
he said routinely.
Please report to the Thwomp, it's the Sector 8 Battleship Indiana the Center. Get a move on,
a Paragoomba guard ordered. Not completely aware of what that meant, Cobal broke away from Group 69 along with a couple other assorted people and began to follow the path directed by the minions towards the huge, looming battleship. Cobal ascended the steep ramp leading up into the battleship's entrance. This was the closest he had ever been to one of the gigantic vessels, and he couldn't help but feel intimidated at the sheer amount of bill blasters that were poking out of the hull or placed on swiveling turrets high up on the superstructure. The interior of the battleship was wooden and lit by warm orange lighting. Cobal and the rest of the chosen conscripts were marched through a tight corridor into a circular intersection which was mostly bare save for a large map of the warship on the wall, as well as the ever-present Koopa Empire banners. They were directed to walk down the corridor to the right. As he walked down the tight passage, Cobal passed several metal doors, which he assumed led to crew quarters and storage rooms. A shy guy who had been guiding them through the ship gestured to one of them.
You'll meet Corporal Strike in there,
he announced.
He'll brief you on your duties.
Being the first in line, Cobal opened the unlocked door and walked into the room. The room he stepped into appeared to be some kind of crew quarters. It was very simple, there were 8 beds off to one side, and a circular table. There was not even the benefit of windows to let in some natural light, likely because it would compromise the defense. Life as a low-ranked Koopa Troop soldier couldn't be sweet. There was only one person in the room, who Cobal saw to be a fire bro. He had his arms crossed and was looking at the new arrivals with a stern expression. Cobal noted the long scar that ran over his right eye. When all the conscripts filled in, the fire bro finally spoke.
Hello everybody. My name's Corporal Strike. As of today, I am going to be your superior. Yeah, we know the drill, son.
Came a raspy voice from Cobal's left. Cobal turned to see an incredibly scratched up Dry Bones limping over to Strike's side.
I've been drafted twice before, so the stuff's nothing new to me.
He chuckled as he adjusted his head.
Thought I could escape the latest batch o' fights, but nah, looks like the stars have nothing but a life o' service for the Koopa King ahead of me.
He laughed again. Cobal thought he didn't seem too upset about the thought, more mildly annoyed than anything. Strike eyed the Dry Bones over.
Since you're a Dry Bones, you must have a lot of experience,
he commented.
You'll be a valuable asset to the team.
The next to step forward was a Goomba wearing a spiked helmet.
You can't imagine how happy I am to meet you, Corporal,
the Goomba exclaimed enthusiastically.
I've always wanted to join the army, but Pops wanted me to go spend my life working at his item shop. Man, Prince Bowser Jr. must be a great guy if he made a law like this. Or maybe not.
Came a sullen voice. Cobal saw that it was a toad with a dark green mushroom cap.
Listen, Corporal, I'll do my job, but I won't do it cheerfully. You Koopas are evil and that is a fact.
Strike narrowed his eyes at the green toad.
You better watch your step, mister,
he said darkly.
And it would be best not to judge people around here. I've came across many toads who've been less than perfect. Even the great Mario, I've heard, was not without his own faults.
The green toad mumbled something under his breath but moved to join the Dry Bones anyway, along with the spiky Goomba. The Goomba was staring around at the Bare Bones cabin with enraptured eyes.
I.
Cobal looked down, it was none other than Shroomer from the Koopa Cruiser. He was shaking again, which he wasn't surprised about.
Prince Bowser Jr. really must be stupid,
Cobal thought to himself.
A guy like this isn't fit for combat at all. My name is Shroomer,
he finally managed to croak out, before shuffling over to stand beside the dark green toad. Cobal could see he was going to need some help. The remaining 3 conscripts who had been assigned to Strike came and went.
This is going to be so cool,
exclaimed a yellow-robed shy guy who sounded rather young to Cobal.
I wonder my talents will be of use,
mused Abu.
Do you think I could tame chain chomps or something?
Asked an excitable green-hued Bob-omb. Strike made scarce comments about the recruits, before finally turning to Cobal. He stared straight in the eye. Strike's eyes were bright blue, but seemed cold and hard to Cobal. Somehow, despite Strike not looking too different from the typical fire bro aside from the scar, Cobal was slightly intimidated. He seemed so cold, and confident.
Yoshi,
Strike said in a composed voice.
You're last up. Got anything to say about yourself? My name is Cobal,
he replied, walking forward to join the rest of them. Really, what else could he say? He couldn't say anything too rebellious, since he was literally in the heart of a Koopa battleship right now. At the same time, there was no way he was going to degrade himself by claiming he was following his biggest dream or something ridiculous like that.
Welcome to the team, Cobal.
Strike nodded. The other recruits gave him passing glances, he hadn't said anything to make himself too interesting to them. There was a low rumble beneath Cobal and the entire room shook. Cobal instantly realized that the ship had to be taking off. He closed his eyes.
I'm sorry, Luigi,
he thought, feeling the shame and humiliation crush him like a gigantic thwomp.
I really am. I'd like to all have your attention,
Strike said. The scarred fire bro began to pace back and forth, as the group watched him.
As I am sure you have all felt, this ship has just taken off. We are headed towards Sector 2, the area ruled by His Highness Prince Morton Koopa Jr. and composed of Sarasa Land and the Sprixie Kingdom. There have been some disagreements between Prince Morton and Prince Roy, and we have been asked by Morton to help him settle things.
Infighting among the royal family? Now this was something new. An empire divided against itself was far weaker than one that moved as one organism. If only he could get this information to Luigi somehow.
I'd like to go over a few things,
Strike said, placing his hands down on the table as he faced the group.
First of all, I'm your direct commanding officer. While naturally my superior's words trump mine, for the most part you will report to me and I will give you orders. Is this clear? Yes, sir.
The spiky Goomba exclaimed, leaping into the air before standing stiffly. It seemed to be the thing Goombas did instead of a salute, Cobal reflected.
Good.
Strike nodded.
As of now, we are heading towards the Sprixie Kingdom. I want all of you to be on our best behavior, as this is not going to be a short flight. Oh, and one last thing. Welcome to the Koopa Troop.
Somehow, Cobal felt as if he had ended up doing the exact opposite of what he had planned when he had first set off to Mushroom City.